So talk to me about anti-cheat.
Anti-cheat, yeah. Okay. So anti-cheat is really interesting. Cheating in games, I would say, is rampant. A lot of cheaters, a lot of complaining about cheating. Obviously, you can't necessarily go on like what people complain about as the truth of encountering a cheater. If you're just like having a bad day and you lose lots, maybe you blame a cheater, but so stuff like that goes on. But actually, I think cheating is rampant, and part of the reason for that is that I would not say that it's easy to cheat, but I think that there's basically an industry now that's grown that specializes in helping people cheat. And I actually don't have the numbers of this, and I wish I did, but I think it's it's a niche industry, but it's pretty valuable. And this niche industry is cheat development. There are quite a few people out there who develop cheats and develop cheats as a service, even where you subscribe to their service. Nice. Or you just buy a cheat outright. And these are like not cheap. You could pay 100 quid for a cheat. You could pay £20 a month for a cheat service. These are not.
That seems more reasonable, doesn't it? They pay installments, yeah, on a subscription.
Yeah. So this is like it's clearly cheating is big enough that it's supporting this industry of cheat development, and it's having a real impact on cheating as a business. So maybe just to talk about the business side of it for a moment and not so much the technical side. Businesses like Fortnite, or I should say Epic, Fortnite, they have these games. They're free to play. So they make no money off of sales. All of their revenue is generated by live services revenue, like in-game purchases, things like that. And when their revenue is driven in that way, basically their revenue is proportional to their player base. So in that sense, they're kind of 100% exposed to cheating, because cheating has the effect of making people stop playing your game. So this is that's the business side of it, and I think it's a relatively simple thing. Basically, cheaters diminish people's desire to play your game, and if your revenue is completely proportional to your player base, then obviously you're just losing money when people quit. So it's a kind of I think it's quite. I don't just think. I know it's a big problem for games companies, and they do a lot of work to try and defeat cheaters. And they do a lot of technologically very impressive work to defeat cheaters. So to get onto the technical side of it, traditionally anti-cheat is something which is, I mentioned it earlier, but it's sitting on a player device and it's trying to detect tampering with the game. And that's not an easy thing necessarily to do. And that's just this is even just the first layer of it. So, the game is running on a player's machine. So the memory of the game is on that player machine. Somewhere on the player's machine, there's the knowledge or the information that, another player is in a location on the map, or something like that. So you can utilize that information, and you can be like, well, computer, please move my cursor to where the opponent is. And this is an aimbot. Basically, it's something that aims for you. And of course, it trivializes a certain part of the game, and it gives you a huge advantage over other people. Now, in that kind of simplistic context where you're just reading the memory of a game, I think it's been quite a while since that has been something which is really effective to do as a cheat developer, or to create as a cheat developer, because it's pretty easy to detect. And for sure, people have been detected for a long time. Obviously, if you're working with an older game, or if you're an open source game builder, or you're an indie dev and you have to deal with all of these problems, it's probably a bit more of a hassle, and you don't necessarily get these protections for free just because you're developing in a modern context. So it's not that it's entirely gone away, but I would say it's a more simplistic thing. So technically, these anti-cheat providers, they then get very, very advanced. So you've got all of the different ways in which some anti-cheat could detect tampering, and at the same time it's trying to protect various parts of the game. Maybe it's doing very complicated things, like it will spoof game memory at a specific location on the machine as a honeypot, basically. And if people interact with that specific like spoofed memory, then they get banned. So it gets very complicated. And the thing is a lot of really good work goes on in that. But it is also very much like plugging holes on a sinking ship continuously. And in the sense that there's just this cat and mouse game between anti-cheat developers and cheat developers. The cheat developers have like the beneficial position that they're really just trying to find holes in something. And that's much easier to do than to plug all the holes. Much, much easier to do.
Yeah.
So, and cheat development work is essentially, it's just a treadmill. You are on it for the long haul. And if you stop, the cheaters quote unquote win. And they might overrun your game, and they might, decimate your player base, maybe. So we kind of took it now to like talk about where we're coming from. We're looking at it from a completely different angle. So our position is basically, and I think it just comes down to two things. If you want to cheat, you have to be better than a human in some way, or you have to like have information that a human can't have in some way. Right? Just the simple example of an aimbot where the cursor gets moved automatically for you. Well, you have to have that behavior of the cursor moving automatically for you. And if you don't, if you get a machine to move your cursor, but it moves it in exactly the same way that a human would, you're essentially gaining no particular advantage. Or if you're like seeing through walls, that's another kind of informational advantage. But essentially that should come out in your behavior. If you can see through walls and then you behave in a way which is identical to any other player of the game, you're essentially gaining no advantage of it. So the first thing is that you can notice you can notice cheating behavior. Cheating behavior is distinguishable from like normal behavior, and it's distinguishable because you are gaining some kind of advantage. It's just a different behavior. And then there's another part of it, which is that if automated behavior is distinguishable from human behavior. That's just a premise that we have. So if you just take those two things, and they're quite similar, really. Our position basically is that you can distinguish cheating behavior from non-cheating behavior, and you can distinguish it by these, of these different kinds of metrics. If you're using an aimbot, then you should definitely be able to be distinguishable because you must be moving in a way which is essentially different to how a human would move a cursor.
I'm guessing that would be like things like speed and precision of movement. You would move exactly to the spot really quickly, as opposed to maybe a slightly kind of curved path. Or
exactly, yeah. So we want to look at that kind of level. We want to look at the behaviors that are implicit in these things, and importantly, like what that really allows us to do is get away from the implementation of cheats. Trying to work against the implementation of cheats is, to me, what is the essence of the treadmill, because there's always going to be another way of implementing the same thing. When you're looking at behavior specifically, there's kind of no way around it. If you exhibit the behavior and you get caught, you cannot exhibit that behavior anymore. So if you can't exhibit behavior which is cheating, it doesn't really matter what you're doing on your machine. You cannot get an advantage from using this. But it also has this other significant benefit, which is that cheats are themselves getting very technologically advanced. And what we're seeing these days is off-device cheating. An off-device cheat basically is something else, like, I don't know, a little dongle that you have running outside of your machine, or it could be you're running literally like another machine outside your machine, and you're picking up, like, I don't know, the HDMI stream of data. You're doing some computer vision to work out where players are on the screen, and then you're sending that information back to the mouse somehow, and it's going to automate the and by the mouse I mean, sorry, the input of the cursor input, and then it's going to automate moving the cursor around. So you basically are taking the entire processing stream of how to like do a cheat, and you're taking it off the player device. And the key thing there is that anti-cheat, traditional anti-cheat, it sits on the player device. So it just can't detect this. It's just completely incapable of witnessing that this is going on. So this is like a huge problem, and I think one way or another, the gaming industry is going to have to face up to these kinds of problems, because it's, it's very it's reputationally damaging for them. And when I say facing up to these problems, I really mean that like these new technological challenges that they're facing, where what they currently have, the methodologies that they're currently using to defeat cheats, aren't going to do it for them. But of course, like if you're just looking at the behavior of cheats, it's immaterial. Okay, it's a new implementation, it's a fancy implementation, but to us it doesn't matter. Your behavior is cheating, therefore you're cheating. And I think that's the important part. And indeed, I think that's like the humanly what we would say, right? It's when you look like you're cheating that you are cheating.
Yeah.
And with the benefit of the kind of machine level view on this, of the behavior, we can detect very minute things that you wouldn't necessarily see, but we are gonna witness.
Yeah. And it feels really good time, doesn't it? Because obviously the gaming industry is just massive. It pretty much eclipses the film industry, which we all think is huge already. Yeah. And we're seeing the rise of esports and players being paid, millions of pounds potentially for winning tournaments. Yeah. So there's a potential huge cost if this comes out that somebody was cheating, managed to win these games. I know it's harder to do because they're quite often in an arena and the environment's controlled, but you can see that maybe moving online a bit more and being a bit more distributed.
Yeah, this really does happen, like exactly what you're describing. Okay, well, I mean, first thing, like people have tried to cheat in an arena context, like with a physical device on their person, and they were, I think, people have been caught doing that at the very least. Maybe people haven't been caught doing that, but more to your point, actually, very recently, there's been this huge, storm of controversy that's surrounding F1 esports. So there's an F1, an official F1 game. They do a lot of esports with that. Not only that, but it's really integrated into the industry around F1 as a whole. So F1 itself, the company, has been putting a lot of effort into that. They've been highlighting it on their YouTube channel. They've been putting money into that. They've been making it official, in other words. So it's important. It's also it's being taken on board again as like a reputational risk for F1. So this is like a big thing, F1 esports racing. And very recently, there's been huge controversy in the top flight level of competition for F1 esports, where there've been a lot of allegations going around about people cheating, and a lot of players of F1 esports, throwing out allegations like, 70% of top level players are cheating, and it's really poisonous, right? I don't know about the veracity of these claims necessarily, but clearly something has been detected, and it's really undermining people's trust in this thing. It's really undermining the reputation of this thing, and therefore, because of how F1, the company, has joined itself to this thing, it's undermining the reputation of F1 as a whole. And so this is it's a huge cost to them. It's really blowing up in their face. Now, I actually, I don't know that cheating has occurred or not, but definitely I think we're going to move to a world where if you want to have these things, you're really going to need to have something which is looking very closely at what's going on, in the same way they do in sport at the Olympics or anti-doping stuff, right? Where you're paying very close attention to what's going on, and you can flag these things. And it's really being able to flag these things as a matter of actually making this thing trustable by the people who are watching it. Otherwise, you're just going to lose your audience. So I think my view on it is that they don't want to give up these esports things. They're well enough aware, as we just discussed, that this is becoming a bigger and bigger thing. It's never going away. It's just going to keep growing. But what you probably can lose is your audience, or at the very least, you can suppress the growth of your audience by having these kind of controversies. So you really want to avoid them. So you really want to have systems that allow you to avoid that.
Yeah, and I suppose that there's always it goes back to kind of the superhero world, doesn't it? There's always a good side and a bad side, and there is around AI ML as well. So this can be used for good. I'm guessing people can also start to apply it for cheating as well, and it make it harder to detect.
Yeah. Well, that's that's the often off-device cheats through and through. Without computer vision, I don't know that you have those implemented as effectively as you would otherwise. So yeah, there's great scope, I think, for people to do that. And I think we're really at the beginning of it, as with everything else, all other kind of technological developments. And it's it's as long as it's economically or it's economical, I should say, for cheat developers to develop cheats, or why wouldn't they? It's a job essentially. And fair enough to them. And I think you have to kind of approach it with that kind of respect, right? Where they're essentially working hard to deliver a product, and they're essentially out competing what game developers themselves are doing to protect their games. And do you have to move to a world where everybody just has to buy cheats? It's a big problem. But that it has, I think you have to be quite hard-headed about it. But yeah, I think they, of course, if it's in their best interest, they will definitely start using ML to do it, and they probably already have, cheat developers, that is. And they'll probably be good at it, because a lot of cheats are quite technologically advanced, and they're written by people who are driven to do this and to make money off this, and they'll probably be good at it.
And I suppose, kind of circling back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, they have a clear vision of where they want to take that cheating business.
Yeah.
They'll gather the data to be able to do it, and it'll be a really good application of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think games are really amenable, in my view, to machine learning, because they are they're bounded spaces where everything is quantized. They're not like the real world at all. They're never. I don't think you're really ever going to face similar problems in a game. Like, let's say you wanted to make self-driving cars in GTA versus in the real world. Way simpler problem in GTA, because everything is demarked in a way which is, it's itself an expression of what the developers have had to do to get everything built in this space, which is limited. It's not like dealing with the real world where everything's just a huge mess. So it's very amenable to it, and that's both goes for, I think, cheating and anti-cheat.